The Terran Alliance outpost frontier, 7 loomed against the backdrop of distant stars, its metal hull reflecting the light of a dying sun. Located at the tense border between human-controlled space and the formidable Cthar Empire, it represented humanity's determination to stand their ground against a technologically superior species that viewed them with undisguised contempt. Colonel Marcus Thorne stood at the observation deck, his weathered face taut with tension as he watched the approaching Cthar vessel. At 42, Thorne had earned his position through battlefield prowess rather than diplomatic finesse. His broad shoulders carried the weight of command with stoic determination, and his steel-gray eyes rarely betrayed emotion. The scar running along his left jawline spoke of close encounters with death that had left him more practical than idealistic. "They're requesting permission to dock, Colonel," Lieutenant Rivera reported, her voice crisp with professional detachment. "Ambassador Forlag himself leads the delegation. They claim this is a goodwill mission." Thorne snorted. In his 15 years of military service, he had yet to witness genuine goodwill from the Cthar. The reptilian species dominated a third of the known galaxy. Their rigid hierarchical society built upon conquest and technological superiority. Their scaled bodies, typically in shades of deep green or blue-black, housed minds that considered humans barely more evolved than primates. "Grant permission," Thorne ordered, straightening his uniform. "Alert security, level 2 protocols. And get political advisor Herring up here. I'll need her insight." The Cthar delegation emerged from their sleek vessel with characteristic imperial bearing. Ambassador Forlag led the procession, his emerald scales gleaming under the station's lights. Standing nearly 7 feet tall, with a powerful tail that occasionally flicked with barely concealed impatience, Forlag cut an imposing figure. His cranial crest, more pronounced than those of his subordinates, signaled his elite bloodline. "Colonel Thorne." Forlag's voice emerged from his translator device with an artificial smoothness that failed to mask the underlying condescension. "The Eternal Empire extends its greetings to your modest facility." His vertical pupils contracted as he surveyed the station's docking bay with thinly veiled disdain. "Ambassador," Thorne acknowledged with a curt nod. "This unexpected visit honors us, though I must admit curiosity about its purpose." A smile slithered across Forlag's reptilian features, exposing rows of needle-sharp teeth. "Cultural exchange, Colonel. The Emperor himself has expressed interest in deepening our understanding of human customs. Particularly, his eyes narrowed with predatory amusement, your mating rituals." Before Thorne could respond to this bizarre statement, Forlag gestured toward his entourage. The Cthar guards parted to reveal a smaller figure who had remained hidden behind their imposing forms. "May I present Lyra, a daughter of the Cthar Eternal Empire. She comes as a gift, a peace bride for the esteemed Colonel of Frontier 7. The female Cthar stepped forward, her head bowed in apparent submission. Unlike the others, Lyra's scales were a pale, opalescent blue that caught and reflected the light in mesmerizing patterns. Her frame was slighter than the male's, though still taller than most human women. But it was her eyes that struck Thorne most forcefully, large, expressive, and a startling shade of amber rather than the typical Cthar obsidian. Advisor Harrington, a sharp-witted diplomat who had spent years studying Cthar culture, stepped close to Thorne and whispered, "This is a trap, sir. Cthar biology is incompatible with ours. They know this. It's an insult disguised as a gift. They expect either rejection, which they'll claim as diplomatic offense, or acceptance, which they'll mock throughout the Empire as proof of human desperation." Thorne maintained his neutral expression with military discipline, though fury simmered beneath. This elaborate humiliation aligned perfectly with Cthar psychological warfare. They excelled at moves that left no favorable counter-response. The Cthar delegation watched expectantly, barely concealing their anticipation. Several guards exchanged glances that, even across species boundaries, clearly communicated amusement. "Ambassador Forlag." Thorne finally spoke, his voice measured. "The Terran Alliance is deeply honored by this gesture of cultural exchange." He noticed a flicker of disappointment in Forlag's eyes. Clearly, an angry outburst had been the hoped-for response. We welcome Lyra not as a bride, but as an honored cultural attaché and distinguished guest of the Terran Alliance. Her presence will undoubtedly enhance cross-species understanding, which I'm sure was the Emperor's true intention. Forlag's tail lashed once in irritation, but his diplomatic training prevailed. How insightful of you, Colonel. Indeed, understanding between our species is long overdue. Throughout this exchange, Lyra remained silent, head bowed. But as Thorn finished speaking, she glanced up briefly, and he caught a flash of something unexpected in those amber eyes. Intelligence, certainly, but perhaps also relief, or even gratitude. Lieutenant Rivera will show your delegation to the diplomatic quarters, Thorn continued smoothly, and will prepare appropriate accommodations for cultural attaché Lyra. As the group departed, Harrington remained behind with Thorn. Nicely handled, Colonel, but we're still left with a Kthar living on the station indefinitely. Keep her under surveillance, Thorn ordered. Respectful but thorough. I want to know what game they're really playing. 3 days passed with the Kthar delegation engaging in painfully formal diplomatic exchanges that accomplished nothing of substance. Lyra remained a silent shadow during official functions, speaking only when directly addressed, her responses minimal and carefully neutral. On the 4th evening, after another tedious dinner with Forlag and his aides, Thorn found himself unable to sleep. He made his way to the observation deck, seeking solace in the vast expanse of stars that always helped put human Kthar tensions into cosmic perspective. To his surprise, the deck wasn't empty. A slender figure stood at the viewport, pale blue scales shimmering faintly in the starlight. Cultural attaché Lyra, he acknowledged, preparing to leave and give her privacy. Colonel Thorn. Her voice, without the translator, had a musical quality, her attempt at human language imperfect but understandable. Please, stay. Curiosity overcame his reluctance. He moved to stand beside her, maintaining a respectful distance as they both gazed out at the stars. You speak our language, he observed. I learn. In secret. Her syntax was fragmented but clear. Kthar leaders not encourage. Understanding of lesser species. The last words carried a subtle inflection that might have been irony. Yet here you are, sent to live among the lesser species. Lyra turned to face him fully, and for the first time, he saw her unguarded. Without the performance of submission, she stood straighter, her gaze direct and evaluating. Not sent, Colonel Thorn. Discarded. The blunt assessment surprised him. That's a dangerous admission to make. Something like a smile flickered across her reptilian features. What more can they do? I'm already exiled. Over the next weeks, Thorn found himself increasingly drawn to the observation deck during the station's night cycle. Sometimes Lyra would be there, sometimes not. When their paths crossed, their conversations grew from hesitant exchanges to lengthy discussions about their respective worlds. He learned that Lyra belonged to a rare genetic subset of Kthar, marked by their paler coloration and, more importantly, by neural structures that facilitated greater emotional range and cognitive flexibility, traits the ruling Kthar bloodlines considered dangerous weaknesses. We are called Vrisai, the soft-minded, she explained one night, 6 weeks into her stay. Her command of human language had improved remarkably. In ancient times, many were scientists, artists. Now we are problems, used for menial work, experiments, or entertainment. And diplomatic pranks, Thorn added grimly. Lyra's head tilted in acknowledgement. When Forlag needed someone expendable for this mission, I volunteered. The alternative was a neuroscience laboratory. Her slender fingers touched the base of her skull reflexively. Kthar scientists are particularly interested in why our brains develop differently. You chose exile over dissection. That's understandable. I chose possibility over certainty, she corrected. The Kthar know only what they have decided to know. Their science is advanced but channeled. They believe human and Kthar biology absolutely incompatible because early tests showed this. They never questioned those results. Thorn found himself increasingly fascinated not just by her insights into Kthar culture, but by Lyra herself. Her presence on the station had transformed from diplomatic complication to something he looked forward to daily. Her quick mind, her subtle humor that emerged as she grew more comfortable, and the quiet courage with which she faced her exile, all drew him to her in ways he hadn't anticipated. Dr. Elizabeth Novak, the station's xenobiologist and one of Thorne's oldest friends, noticed his interest. After observing a particularly animated conversation between Thorne and Lyra in the station's arboretum, she pulled him aside. "I've never seen you this engaged with anyone, Marcus, human or otherwise," she remarked, using the familiarity earned through years of friendship. "It's intriguing from both personal and professional perspectives." Thorne frowned. "What are you suggesting, Elizabeth?" "Nothing inappropriate," she assured him. "But as a scientist, I'm curious." Lyra's assertions about Kthar biological assumptions deserve investigation. With her permission, of course. With Lyra's cautious agreement, Dr. Novak began a series of discreet examinations. What started as basic medical assessments evolved into a fascinating exploration of Vrisai cellular structures. "It's remarkable," Novak explained to them both in her lab, secure from surveillance. "Kthar's standard biology is indeed incompatible with humans, but Lyra's cellular adaptability is like nothing I've documented. The Vrisai subset appears to have specialized stem cells with extraordinary plasticity." Lyra nodded. "The Eternal Empire considers this a flaw. Biological inconsistency undermines their belief in Kthar genetic perfection." "It's not a flaw," Novak countered, excitement evident in her voice. "It's evolutionary brilliance. In theory, these cells could adapt to interact with foreign biological systems under the right conditions. The medical implications alone are staggering." As the research continued in secret, the relationship between Thorne and Lyra deepened. Their intellectual connection evolved into emotional intimacy, shared confidences, life stories, hopes that neither had dared express elsewhere. For Thorne, who had always prioritized duty over personal connections, the experience was both unsettling and exhilarating. 3 months after Lyra's arrival, the main Kthar delegation departed, leaving behind only a small cultural observation team that Thorne knew consisted primarily of intelligence operatives. Ambassador Forlag's farewell dripped with barely concealed disappointment that his ploy had failed to produce the desired humiliation. "We shall return in 6 standard months to evaluate the success of our cultural exchange," Forlag informed Thorne. "I'm sure Lyra will have much to report about human customs." The emphasis he placed on the word report made its true meaning clear. Lyra was expected to function as an informant. After the ambassador's departure, the atmosphere on the station lightened considerably. Without the constant diplomatic posturing, Lyra integrated more fully into station life. Her technical knowledge proved valuable in several engineering projects, and her genuine curiosity about human cultures endeared her to much of the crew. 5 months into Lyra's stay, during a rare moment of complete privacy in Thorne's quarters, their relationship crossed the final boundary. What began as an intimate conversation about belonging and identity transformed into physical expression of emotions neither had planned to develop. "This changes everything," Thorne whispered afterward, his fingers tracing the luminescent patterns along her shoulder where human touch had triggered bioluminescent responses in her scales. "It already was everything," Lyra replied softly. "This just makes it honest." 2 weeks later, Lyra collapsed during her shift in the engineering section. Dr. Novak treated her in private, then called Thorne to the medical lab after ensuring security protocols were at maximum. "I've confirmed it 3 times," Novak stated without preamble when Thorne arrived. "It's unprecedented, but undeniable. Lyra is pregnant, with what appears to be a viable human Kthar hybrid embryo." The news hit Thorne like a physical blow. "That's supposed to be impossible." "Apparently not for Vrisai biology," Novak explained, displaying cellular scans on her screen. "Her adaptive cells are interacting with human genetic material in ways that defy everything we know about xenogenetics. The embryo's development is stable so far, with a fascinating cellular architecture that incorporates elements from both species. Lyra sat calmly on the examination table, one hand resting protectively over her abdomen. "This is why the Vrisi were marginalized," she said quietly. "Not just for our thoughts, but for our biological potential. We threaten the purity doctrine that underpins Kthar's social hierarchy." The implications were staggering. Beyond the personal shock, parenthood had never figured in Thorne's life plans, let alone parenthood of an unprecedented interspecies child. The political ramifications threatened galactic stability. "If the Kthar find out," Thorne said grimly, "they'll take you back for experimentation. Or worse. And the Terran Alliance might do the same," Novak added bluntly. "This discovery has military and political implications that would tempt any government." That night, in the privacy of Thorne's quarters, they formed their inner circle of trust. Besides Thorne, Lyra, and Dr. Novak, they included Lieutenant Rivera, whose loyalty to Thorne was absolute, and Chief Engineer Patel, whose technical skills would be essential for maintaining communication security. "We have less than 3 weeks before the Kthar delegation returns," Thorne reminded them. "By then, Lyra's condition will be harder to conceal. We need options." "Medical leave," Novak suggested. "I can fabricate records showing Lyra has contracted a rare virus requiring isolation. It would keep her away from Kthar sensors." "They'll be suspicious," Rivera countered. "Forlag will demand his own physicians examine her." "Then we need to get her off the station before they arrive," Patel suggested. "But where?" "No Terran facility would be safe once the Alliance learns what's happening." The debate continued until Lyra spoke. "There is another option. We tell the truth, on our terms, in a way that protects both the child and the potential it represents." Her proposal was audacious. Rather than hiding, they would present their discovery at the upcoming multi-species scientific conference on Genesis Station, the neutral scientific hub funded by a consortium of 17 spacefaring civilizations. There, under the protection of scientific diplomatic protocols, they could reveal both the pregnancy and Dr. Novak's research before either the Kthar Empire or Terran Alliance could suppress or weaponize the information. "The conference is in 16 days, Novak noted. "We'd have to leave immediately, and I'd need time to organize my research for presentation. And we'd need clearance from Alliance Command for both the trip and the presentation," Thorne added, his military mind already calculating risks and contingencies. "Not necessarily," Rivera interjected. "You're due for your annual inspection tour of outposts in this sector. Genesis Station is technically within range. We could file standard travel plans with minimal scrutiny." The plan took shape with military precision. Official records showed Colonel Thorne departing on a routine inspection tour, accompanied by his medical officer and the Kthar cultural attaché as part of ongoing diplomatic initiatives. Lieutenant Rivera would remain in command of Frontier 7, with sealed orders to be opened only if the primary team failed to reach Genesis Station. Obtaining clearance for Dr. Novak's presentation proved more challenging but not impossible. The doctor's reputation in xenobiology earned her a late addition to the conference schedule, though the true nature of her research remained undisclosed in the official abstract. The journey to Genesis Station aboard a Terran military transport was tense but uneventful. Lyra remained secluded in the ship's medical bay, ostensibly to avoid stress on her compromised immune system. In reality, the privacy allowed Novak to continue her research and documentation, building an irrefutable scientific case. 3 days before reaching Genesis Station, they received a priority communication from Lieutenant Rivera. The Kthar delegation had arrived at Frontier, 7 ahead of schedule, and Ambassador Forlag was demanding Lyra's immediate return for health evaluation, following reports of her illness. "He suspects something," Thorne concluded after reviewing the message. "But he can't know what. Stay the course." Genesis Station lived up to its reputation as the galaxy's premier neutral scientific facility. A massive orbital structure with 16 radiating arms, each dedicated to different research disciplines. It operated under its own charter independent of any single species government. Their arrival proceeded according to plan, their credentials accepted without complication. Dr. Novak's presentation was scheduled for the conference's third day in the Xenobiological Adaptation Symposium. Perfect timing, Novak noted as they settled into their quarters. Lyra will be just over 5 months pregnant by then, advanced enough to be undeniable, but still early enough to minimize risk to her and the child. The evening before Novak's presentation, security alerts flashed throughout Genesis Station. A Kthar diplomatic vessel had arrived unscheduled, requesting emergency docking privileges. Ambassador Forlag himself requested admission to the station on urgent diplomatic business. He knows, Lyra said, her hand instinctively moving to her abdomen, now showing a subtle curve beneath her adapted station uniform. Someone on Frontier 7 must have leaked information. It changes nothing, Thorne decided. We proceed as planned. Genesis Station's neutrality protocols prevent either forcible extraction or interference with scheduled scientific presentations. The Xenobiology Symposium was held in Amphitheater C, a vast semicircular hall designed to accommodate multiple species comfortably. By the time Dr. Novak took the stage, the room was filled to capacity, word having spread of a groundbreaking announcement in cross-species compatibility research. From their position in the front row, Thorne saw Ambassador Forlag and 3 Kthar security officers enter through a side door just as Novak began speaking. The ambassador's eyes scanned the crowd, until they locked onto Lyra, narrowing with predatory intensity. For centuries, we have accepted certain assumptions about interspecies biological compatibility, Novak began, her voice steady despite the tension. These assumptions have shaped not only our scientific understanding, but our diplomatic and cultural interactions as well. Her presentation methodically dismantled the established dogma of species incompatibility, displaying cellular imaging, genetic sequencing, and adaptation mechanisms previously undocumented. She carefully avoided mentioning Lyra specifically until the foundation of her scientific argument was established. These findings suggest that certain genetic subgroups across species exhibit cellular adaptability far beyond our previous understanding, Novak continued. The implications for medicine, environmental adaptation, and even our fundamental conception of life's diversity are profound. Thorne watched Forlag's reaction as understanding dawned on the ambassador's reptilian features, followed by visible alarm. The Kthar began moving toward the stage, only to be blocked by station security officers. Thorne had anticipated this reaction and requested precautionary measures. Theory is valuable, Novak stated, nearing her conclusion, but empirical evidence is definitive. I now present the most compelling demonstration of cross-species cellular compatibility ever documented. This was the cue they had arranged. Thorne stood and offered his hand to Lyra, who rose gracefully to join him. Together, they walked to the stage, the subtle curve of Lyra's pregnancy now deliberately unhidden as she stood beside Dr. Novak. A murmur swept through the audience, scientists of 17 species recognizing the implications immediately. Forlag's thunderous voice cut through the growing commotion. This is a Terran deception, an abomination against biological law. The Kthar ambassador pushed forward despite security's restraining hands. The female is a criminal fugitive from the Eternal Empire, and I demand her immediate surrender. Ambassador Forlag, Thorne spoke, his voice carrying the authority of his military rank. Cultural attaché Lyra is here under Terran protection as part of an official scientific delegation. Any claims against her person must be submitted through proper diplomatic channels and considered by the Genesis Station Neutrality Council. Dr. Novak smoothly retook control of the presentation. We have prepared comprehensive documentation of all cellular, genetic, and developmental processes for peer review. The evidence is incontrovertible. What you are witnessing is indeed a viable human Kthar pregnancy, now in its 22nd week of development. The scientific community erupted in fascinated discussion. 3 Danubian geneticists rushed forward with questions. A Centauri medical ethicist demanded details on consent protocols. An elderly Arcturian evolutionary biologist simply wept with joy at what he called the ultimate refutation of genetic determinism. Throughout the chaos, Thorne remained at Lyra's side, his hand never leaving hers. They had prepared for outrage, for skepticism, even for danger, but the overwhelming scientific curiosity and excitement surpassed their expectations. The Genesis Station administration quickly established an emergency scientific review panel to evaluate Novak's research and determine appropriate protocols for the unprecedented situation. The Cathar delegation was granted observer status, but prohibited from interfering with the proceedings under station neutrality laws. Over the next 72 hours, Lyra underwent exhaustive but carefully monitored examinations by the multi-species medical team. The fetus, revealed to be female, showed remarkable stability, with cellular structures that elegantly bridged the gap between human and Cathar biology. The adaptive mechanisms are nothing short of miraculous, declared the Rigelian head of the review panel. This represents an evolutionary breakthrough with implications for all known sentient species. News of the discovery spread throughout civilized space with the speed of quantum communication. On Earth, the Terran Alliance Council convened an emergency session to determine their official position. Within the Cathar Empire, rumors caused unprecedented public discourse and questions about long-held biological truths. 7 days after the initial presentation, the Genesis Station Neutrality Council delivered its ruling. Lyra and her unborn child would receive protected status as unique entities of scientific and cultural importance. Neither the Terran Alliance nor the Cathar Empire could claim exclusive authority over them. Additionally, a new research institute would be established on Genesis Station focusing on interspecies compatibility, with Dr. Novak appointed as its human representative. Ambassador Forlag, outmaneuvered diplomatically and scientifically, made one final attempt to reassert Cathar authority. The female Lyra carries Cathar genetic material that is the property of the Eternal Empire, he declared during the final council session. While we cannot extract her from protection, we maintain genetic rights to the offspring. It was Lyra who responded, rising to face her former tormentor with quiet dignity. The child I carry is neither human nor Cathar exclusively, but the first of something new. She represents not what separates our species, but what we might become together. She placed one hand on her growing abdomen. The Cathar sent me as a joke, Ambassador Forlag. A living insult to demonstrate human desperation and Cathar superiority. Instead, I found connection, respect, and possibility. The joke, it seems, has birthed a miracle. The audience erupted in supportive applause, and even several younger Cathar scientists present broke with protocol to join the ovation. Forlag, his political position now untenable, withdrew his objection and departed Genesis Station the following day. For months later, in a newly established Genesis Medical Center, Lyra gave birth to a daughter. The child had Thorne's dark hair, growing in a soft crest along her head, pale blue scales with a subtle luminescence, and eyes that shifted between human blue and Cathar amber, depending on the light. They named her Nova, New Star, appropriate for a being whose existence represented a new possibility in the galaxy. In the year that followed, significant changes rippled through both human and Cathar societies. The Terran Alliance, recognizing the scientific and diplomatic advantage of Dr. Novak's discovery, established formal research cooperation with the Genesis Institute. Within the Cathar Empire, a reformist movement gained unprecedented momentum, led by younger scientists who questioned other unchangeable truths of their rigid society. Most surprisingly, a delegation of Vrissai Cathar emerged from the shadows of imperial society, seeking political asylum and offering their unique genetic insights to the growing field of compatibility studies. Their testimonies revealed centuries of suppression and experimentation aimed at eradicating their deviant genetics, a campaign that had nearly succeeded but for scattered survivors like Lyra. 2 years after Nova's birth, a new Cathar ambassador arrived at Genesis Station. Unlike Forlag, Ambassador Tanera was female, her scales the telltale pale green of Vrisai heritage, her position representing the most visible sign of reform within the empire. The child must be acknowledged as kin to the empire, Tanera declared, not as a demand but as recognition. She bridges what was thought unbridgeable. Such potential cannot be denied, even by the most traditional houses. The formal acknowledgement came with unexpected offers: dual citizenship for Nova within both human and Cathar territories, protected status for Vrisai throughout the empire, and expanded scientific cooperation focused on medical applications of adaptive cellular technology. On Nova's third birthday, celebrated in the family quarters Thorn and Lyra now maintained on Genesis Station, representatives from 12 species gathered to mark the occasion. The child moved comfortably among them, already displaying the remarkable adaptability of her heritage, physically, mentally, and socially. As the celebration wound down, Thorn found Lyra standing at the viewport, watching distant stars just as she had on their first real conversation years earlier on Frontier 7. "Any regrets?" he asked, joining her in the stargazing. Lyra smiled, her expression having grown increasingly human-like through their years together, though remaining distinctly her own. "None. Though I sometimes wonder what Ambassador Forlag's face looked like when he received word that the Vrisai are now protected citizens rather than expendable tools." Thorn laughed. "I'd have paid good credits to see that. The man who sent you as a cruel joke now watches your people rise in status while his own influence wanes. The universe has a sense of humor after all," Lyra agreed, leaning against him as they watched their daughter, charming an Arcturian scientist, with her precocious questions about stellar formation. "Imagine their faces," Thorn mused, "when Nova eventually takes her place in the galaxy. Whatever she becomes, scientist, diplomat, explorer, she'll be living proof that their most fundamental assumptions were wrong." "That's the greatest victory," Lyra said softly. "Not proving them wrong, but opening possibilities they never imagined. Nova won't be the last. Already there are others following our path." Indeed, the Genesis Institute now hosted 3 other confirmed interspecies pregnancies, couples inspired by their story who had discovered compatible genetic patterns once thought impossible. The stars continued their eternal dance beyond the viewport, indifferent to the social and biological barriers falling away in their light. Somewhere out there, the Cathar Eternal Empire continued its reluctant evolution toward a more inclusive future. The Terran Alliance expanded its understanding of biological possibility. And on Genesis Station, a small girl with scales and hair played among the representatives of a changing galaxy, the living embodiment of a joke that had transformed into humanity's most serious hope for the future.